Welcome into episode 200. Be sure you're following us on Twitter at BaileyJAdams22, at ByCASimmons, at Night Sports Now, and at Pegasus Podcast. On our 200th episode, you almost got me to crack right as I did the intro. I can't even repeat what you said to make me laugh.
So, we were very close. I thought I had you on that one.
All right, made it through. So 200 episodes.
It's crazy.
Every time we have like a big episode like this, I'm like, I didn't think we would be doing this long. I didn't think it would last.
And I don't know why I thought that by pointing out that it's technically not our 200th episode since we've done emergency podcast.
No, it certainly isn't. Yeah, no, there have been some unnumbered podcasts, but
yeah, we don't number whenever we had to do. I was going to say a surprise podcast. We've never called them that. An emergency podcast or when something unexpected happens, those aren't typically numbered podcasts because they're more just 15 minutes of Bailey and I acting shocked about something. But still, this is our 200th main podcast. And
I like how you say acting shocked as if like we're not actually shocked about these things.
Yeah, like when Travis Williams leaves, I see it. And in my head, I'm just like, who cares? And I get on the podcast. I'm like, can you believe that Travis Williams?
Yeah, we just act shocked. We're really good at acting.
Well, given that UCF's already on defensive coordinator number 2 in 2 seasons after losing T. Will, I think we were right to act shocked for that one. But yeah, 200 episodes, man. Is it weird that 200 feels less important to me than 100? Is that wrong?
I think so.
Because 200 is twice as many. So probably, it should be more impressive. But I don't know. I feel like 250 is the big one. I don't know. To me, that one's crazy.
Why? Well, okay, we're taking this off the rails immediately. We'll talk about our spring game preview in a second, but this is something that will interest you. We were at the Magic game. My brother, his wife, and I were at the Magic game
Go Magic.
2 Saturdays ago.
That's the 3rd seed Orlando Magic for those listening.
Yes. And it was their 35th anniversary year. And I think it was my brother who was like, I feel like 35 is like a weird year to do like a big like logo thing for. And I was like, yeah, I guess I feel like teams usually do it like every 5 years, I guess. And I don't know, just you saying 250 is the bigger one reminded me of that because it was like, why?
So I had this is a real conversation I had with my dad, I guess more than 6 months ago now, when the Orlando Magic season was approaching and they unveiled that logo. I didn't see it.
Mm-hmm.
I see my dad. He says, oh, did you see the Magic unveiled their 35th anniversary logo? And I so confidently go, it is not their 35th anniversary. And he's like, why do you say that? And I'm like, because I still have all my stuff from their 25th anniversary. Like that was not 10 years ago. And then I look it up and it ruined my life to realize that the 25th anniversary, which I remember as if it were yesterday and still have all this stuff for, was 10 years ago. So I was not thrilled with the Magic doing this to personally attack me.
What's been so weird in the last few years, like the Magic is 35th this year. The Lightning a few years ago had their 30th. And they were like established the same year my brother was born, so 92.
Yeah.
And then the Rays were established the same year I was born, 98. And the Rays just had their 25th last year. So it's like all these things that are making me feel really
UCF football just had their 40th a few years ago, and I don't think they really promoted that, did they?
I don't think so, because I don't even remember it.
It was 2019 was their 40th.
Yeah, no, I don't think they did.
Well, okay, it's one of those weird things where it was their 40th year, but it wouldn't have been their 40th season, right? Because like 79 is a season, so
yeah, it's always weird like that.
Yeah,
I always get confused by that.
If you're on YouTube, and you're wondering what the hell is going on over here on my screen, I am still working on where I'm going to do the podcast in my apartment. And it's not going well because I can't find a space that makes sense. So I still have an empty wall behind me. So we're using a virtual background, which I think looks nice, but I just tried to give a thumbs up a second ago and my thumb did not load over the virtual background. So I felt like the illusion was up. So I might as well point out that this is
I'm actually talking to AI Christian right now.
It's going to be like the spring game from last year when I let AI tweet for me. I'm just going to let an AI chat bot do my part on the podcast.
Yeah. Last thing about the 200th episode is this is a reminder of how long we've been doing this. You and I had this conversation 2 weeks ago, I think, where we were talking about how the Henderson twins, Nakai, they're juniors now.
God.
And we were
you called me out for that.
Yeah, because I was like, we were talking about them as freshmen, like as recruits, like when they committed. And now they're juniors in college now. And
was that on the podcast or just us talking when I went on my whole texting my whole thing where I was like, I just love like UCF's defense is so good and it's so young. Guys like Nakai, Damari, you're like they're not young.
Like they're juniors
literally juniors. I know.
Yeah. Well, you're like, did Damari redshirt? And I was like, I don't know, did he? And you're like, no, he did not. So yeah.
Well, I was just grasping at straws. I was trying to act like him redshirting would somehow make him younger than he is. He's still not a young player, even if he redshirted. But yeah, I mean, we had episode 100 in October of 2022, which for some reason in my head it was not that long ago, so it's time. No, it doesn't
feel like. Well, because it's weird how we celebrate these episodes, and then we also just celebrated our third birthday as a podcast. So that was only like 3 months ago. So
God, that was 3 months ago already. I know I literally just said this 1 or 2 episodes ago, but I know that our older listeners appreciate so much when the two like late 20 somethings are just complaining about how old they're getting. I'm sure that's going over super well.
I think it probably goes over even worse when you just called me a late 20 something. I'm 26. Like
Yeah,
even somebody who's
you're
like
mid.
28 or 29, it's like
You're mid 20. I'm late 20s. 27 is absolutely late 20s.
yeah,
No doubt about it.
the very beginning of late 20s though.
That's true.
Obviously.
That's true.
If
I hope
20,
so.
26
Yeah.
is still mids, then 27 is yeah. All right,
Oh man.
let's talk about the spring game. We're gonna preview the spring game. It's already probably gonna be a long episode because we got a lot to talk about the spring game, and we just spent 10 minutes on that. But yeah, let's get into this. We have a few questions or a few topics to talk about and some little mini topics under those. But we'll start with kind of the obvious thing that you look at in spring games is who's with the starting group, who's with the number twos, kind of how the depth chart seems to be shaking out. And there are quite a few positions where there's a lot of intrigue, I think. And we've
Which let
talked
me
about
just
this one.
say to start off, we're not going to learn any. Like, I don't know how much we'll learn substantially from the spring game. I was trying to think back to past years if we really learned about the depth chart. And like sometimes you learn some minor things, like especially because there are some positions UCF can't really hide here. We're going to see who comes out for the offensive line. We're going to see who's out at wide receiver. But I don't know. I feel like we need to throw in that caveat of none of this might mean anything by fall, you know?
It's all relative too, because you look at it and you're like, right now it feels like we know nothing other than like what's been reported. So it's like when we can actually see it with our own eyes, our knowledge will increase that much to where it feels like we're actually like, oh, we know what's going on now, which we really don't, but it's still like at least something concrete for people to talk about.
We're going to see some of these guys out there, and it feels real.
Yeah.
And we love things that feel real.
Yeah. So we'll start with wide receiver, which is a position we've talked about a lot. And you pointed out before we started recording this podcast, because Kobe Hudson's, I guess, been a little banged up and they don't really need to see, we talked about how they don't need to see anything from Kobe. There's possibility that he doesn't play in the spring game. So we
I'd
get
say
even more.
I'd be very surprised if he's out there. I'm assuming
I feel the same way about RJ will play either. But yeah, with Kobe, it'd be surprising if he played. So that's just going to give us more of a chance to see some of these guys and who kind of, not who's like leading on the depth chart, but just, I don't know, we can have our own ways of like analyzing who stands out and, you know, who could be guys to watch come fall. But the number one guy that we've been talking about a lot lately, and just because of what we've heard from him and just the few highlights they've put out, is Burdell Richardson, the true freshman. And the other thing, and that's just I think that's at the very base level, like the spring game is just a chance for us to see these players play like for the first time, some of them, and then other ones who maybe take a step forward. Like I'm really curious, and this is reading into who they've had out for media availabilities, but I believe, didn't they have Chauncey Magwood and Trent Whittemore both talk to the media recently?
They did, but like half the team has spoken at this point, so I'm reading into it less than I usually do. But you look at wide receiver, and seriously, it's Xavier Townsend, and assuming Kobe doesn't play, which, like I said, I'd be very surprised. It's Xavier Townsend, and then a bunch of guys we really don't know much about. Chauncey Magwood barely, if played at all, last year. We've obviously never seen Burdell Richardson play for UCF. We've never seen Goldie Lawrence play for UCF. Trent Whittemore was used very lightly last year, and so it's kind of a nice sort of petri dish almost, where you've removed Kobe because we know what he is and don't need to see any more from him. And now they can just throw all these guys out here and we'll see. And what are we going to learn in what's literally a half of football, since the second half is skill game stuff? I don't know, but it's still going to be interesting, A, to see who gets out there, and B, who shines. I mean, it's an opportunity. We've talked about past spring games. There's typically one player who is very good and everyone notices, and then they go on to have a good season. So it's always the question of who's that going to be this year.
I had this thought earlier, and I don't know if it's just maybe a little bit of hopium, but it's like I looked at Chauncey Magwood and Trent Whittemore, and I'm like, they didn't do anything last year. But I'm wondering, the UCF went into last season knowing Javon Baker, Kobe Hudson, Xavier Townsend. There wasn't a lot of room for those guys to kind of force their way in, I don't think. And I'm wondering if now that there is kind of more of a path, if one of them takes a big leap forward. I'm hoping that's the case, just because UCF needs somebody to take a leap forward. But the other one that I was intrigued by is Tyree Patterson, who was a freshman last year and redshirted. And we'll get a chance to maybe see some of him. But again, it's a lot of these guys that are we don't know much about. We haven't seen them in game action, so we'll see which of them make plays. And we'll see. I guess if Kobe's out, we'll see which of them get to catch passes from KJ, because I mean that will tell us at least a little bit, and we'll see if KJ has a connection with any of those guys. So that one, wide receiver, is, and I think the thing with wide receiver and a lot of the skill positions, it's like very easy you can't miss it. You know what I mean? Like some of the stuff, like you've got to make a concerted effort to watch the trench play and then maybe watch some of the DBs, but you're going to see a wide receiver when he makes a play. So That's
But
more
this is what I love about the spring game, because I'm already in my head, you're saying that, and I'm just thinking to myself, if all the wide receivers popped off, I'm going to be so concerned about the secondary. I'm going to come on our post-game podcast and talk about how, wow, the secondary couldn't even deal with a wide receiver core that featured no Javon Baker, no Kobe Hudson.
Yeah.
So that's what we love about spring games. But yeah, it'll
Nothing's
just be
good.
do you think that, not from a team perspective, because none of this matters for the team, but do you think from a fan base perspective, there's any pressure on Townsend to have a good night just because he's the only real, known wide receiver out there? Like, is it going to be a bad look for him if he just doesn't do anything?
Maybe, but like maybe people will look into that, but it should not matter. It shouldn't matter, but maybe it will. I don't know.
When he surprise enters the portal after the spring game, I'm gonna declare that it was because the fans turned on him after his performance.
Yeah. Another position with this is running backs, and kind of just, we obviously know RJ Harvey is the guy. And like I said, he might not even play himself, because I know after one of the scrimmages, I think it was, Gus had said, we kind of more not even really, I don't even know if he used the word precaution. It was more just like we didn't need to see him kind of thing.
It might be one of those things where he starts and gets, I don't know, 3 carries and then you don't see him again, because he is, I mean, he's the biggest, he's still the biggest star on the team, right? I mean, he's the most ahead of KJ, I think, as far as the fan base is concerned. So. Yeah. So you want him out there a little bit.
And so the big point of intrigue is who's behind him. Is that Johnny Richardson, or is it Miles Montgomery, the transfer in from Cincinnati?
Yeah.
And I don't know. Johnny Richardson has been the guy who has just remained. Like he is
we do this dance
through
every single offseason of, okay, they finally brought in the guy who's going to get rid of Johnny Richardson as RB2, and then he just clings on. So it wouldn't surprise me if he clings on once again. But yeah, I'm curious about this one.
I kind of think he might.
I kind of do too. I kind of do too.
He's going to stick again.
What a weird legacy that would be for his full UCF career, of just steadily RB2 behind multiple RB1s over like 4 seasons. Like that's a very interesting legacy.
Like always replacing the starter, but he's just never moves up, but never leaves. Like it's just,
Especially for like a skill position with the kind of turnover running back has, like that's not a bad legacy. It's to just consistently be a guy getting carries over multiple seasons. It's just really funny, which, who knows, maybe Miles Montgomery takes that spot, but I'm kind of curious who we see more of, who looks good. I mean, we know what we have in Johnny. Miles Montgomery, not so much. It'll be interesting to see him out there. I'm excited to see how, and they'll get perfectly even reps because RJ won't play or something, and we won't be able to learn anything, but you never know.
Yeah, they're going to come out of this with like one of them will run 10 times for like, I don't know, 42 yards. The other one run like 9 times for 41 yards. And it's going to be like, all right, well, we learned a lot.
We also need to learn to not even talk about the skill stuff that happens in the second half, the fun stuff, because last year they held a race to see who the fastest player on the team was. And DeMarcus Bowman won, and then we spent 4 months talking about how DeMarcus Bowman is going to be this amazing player. It wasn't just because of that. There was other stuff.
I was going to say, I don't even know that happened until you just said that.
Well, no, but that built up the hype a lot, especially among the fan base, because it was like, oh my God, wow, he's faster than Johnny, and he's built more like RJ. Like, this is going to be crazy. And then he did not play. So
no, I missed that whole wrinkle. I just thought he was going to be really good just from everything else we heard, and they barely played.
Yeah.
Now he's gone.
That being said, if Lee Hunter catches a punt successfully, I'm going to have some takes about where he should be playing. So
yeah. Let's move on. Offensive line is another one on the offense. The last group on the offense we'll look at, and I feel like there's almost, it's more so just like who runs out there at first as the starting group, and we'll kind of get something from that, I think, but maybe not a ton. I mean, obviously it's going to change. We didn't learn anything last year from who UCF ran out there on the offensive line from game 6 to game 7 to game 8 to game 9, because it was always a different group. But it's some of the guys left, and so I think I don't want to say it's not as deep, but it's like there are more unknowns now, because
there are question marks for sure.
Some of those guys left, and it's like, all right, well now there should be depth and there should be competition, but we'll see if those guys really are at that level yet, or if it's going to be a year or two. I don't know.
What you said is spot on, though. There are some things they straight up can't hide, and which 5 guys run out there at the start of the spring game is something they can't hide. So I am super curious, because it's also, what do we know Amari Kite will be out there. We know Adrian Medley will be out there. We know Marcellus Marshall will be out there. There's 2 spots that we're not totally sure. I mean, they brought in Wes Dorsey, the Western Kentucky transfer, as like maybe a replacement right tackle, but I feel like we haven't heard anything about him at all. And then you have the 3-way center battle: Caden Kittler, Walt Claire Flynn, and Jabari Brooks. We don't really know what's going on there. So I'm very curious to see who comes out at center. Like super curious.
I thought about that earlier when I was looking at the spring roster and thinking like, do they have enough tackles? Because
Ugh.
it's like those two, and then there's Paul Rubelt, he's been here for. I swear Paul Rubelt's been here since I was a student.
I actually think he has.
And
Wasn't his first year
what has he?
2018?
Oh, he might have been.
Yeah.
How's he been here that long?
Wait, that'd be 7 years. Maybe it wasn't 2018. Let me look it up. I'll find out. It does feel like he's been here a really long time.
Yeah, I just seem to remember him being there forever. But yeah, and Wes Dorsey is another one that maybe ends up being a replacement there for Tyler Grable.
This is an absolute lie. It says Paul Rubelt's first season was 2020. That is not true. I don't care that it's on UCF's official website. I don't believe it.
Well, what does it say?
What do you mean? What does it say?
Like it just says 2020, and then it says like
yeah, it says high school and then freshman season 2020.
Yeah, that seems wrong.
I don't believe that. I'm calling it incorrect. That means he could have another year after this year though, because 2020 was a free year, and I think he redshirted in 2021.
Because I remember seeing him like when they were out of the tunnel or whatever, and I didn't go to any games in 2020. So it's like I swear I saw him in 2019. Unless I'm just thinking of 2021 when we got to return to the
We've reached the point of the podcast where we are calling the official UCF site wrong over when a player. I think part of it too is that, like you think about 2020, A, that was a long time ago, and B, I think in modern college football where it's becoming increasingly rare for a player who's good to be on a team for more than 2 years, 5 years is a long time to be talking about. And I know it's not, I said a good player. I know we haven't seen him, but it's just a name that, 2020 was a long time ago, man. The podcast didn't exist.
I saw a tweet, I think it was toward the end of last week, where it was like, everyone talks about 2019 as if it was like not that long ago, but it's been a half decade since then.
I hate that so much.
That's horrible. It's a horrible thing to think. And it ruined my day when I heard that. But
that's also just a reminder of how long ago the win streak was for UCF at this point. We're coming up on that being quite far in the rear view.
Well, the other tweet that was when was college football's like peak era, and you were like, I forgot the date, August 31st, 2017 to January 1st, 2019.
Yeah.
I was like, that was a long time ago. I enjoyed that tweet, but then it also made me think like, wow, it's been a while since this has been what it was.
I was going through old tweets looking for something, I don't remember what, a couple days ago, and I found a tweet that I didn't like because it was about Gus. It was towards the end of 2021, and I was referring to 2021 the same way Gus had as like a good foundational year that they're now going to build off of. And then I just thought about how they built nothing.
I think I wrote
since that season.
Well, yeah, and then I clearly at that point didn't understand how college football was going to work from now on, because I wrote after the Gasparilla Bowl how the Gasparilla Bowl showed like the blueprint of like what UCF's defense is going to look like going forward, because they had all these young guys and all these guys like, this guy's returning, and it's like, well, then there's the portal now.
I very clearly remember you writing that and Tatum Bethune entering the portal after, because it was like, damn it. And I got to say, the whole UCF not building anything since 2021. It's not totally fair because they also like moved to the Power 5, and obviously 2023 would have been a different year if they were in the AAC. But I think it just comes down to 2022 again as a year where I think everyone thought they were going to do all these things. They just didn't. And I guess we'll never get over it, but what can you do?
That's what it is. No, I never will get over it. Anything else on the offensive line before we move to the defense?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing them hopefully catch some punts.
I'll enjoy it. It's always funny. Like, I don't know, why is that just it's such a basic thing that everyone enjoys, like watching a big guy try to catch, like do something athletic. It's like obviously
I think it would be more funny if they made the punter try to catch a punt. I don't know why. Yeah. I just think it'd be funny. Like make Mitch McCarthy. It'd be funny if he had to catch his own punt. Like let's test.
I was gonna say he had to punt it straight in the air and then catch it.
Because one thing that I think the average fan doesn't realize is how freaking impossibly hard it is to catch a football. Like honestly, like any kind of kickoff or punt.
People get like an easy visual of it every home game when they do the jugs machine, and no one can seem to do that.
If you've ever
Greg Lovelady did it, and he was money.
Okay, but athlete, to be fair, like former athlete and still involved in the athletic space.
Former college World Series winner.
I think about especially in football, there are little things like that happen every single game that I just like. I don't understand how teams don't screw up the hold on a field goal attempt all the time. Like that to me is something that should be screwed up all the time. Or the snap, literally just snapping the ball. And I know some teams do screw it up all the time, but it's just these little tiny football things that I feel like the average person is incapable of that they do like it's clockwork. It's very interesting to me.
What's going to be like? I guess Lee Hunter caught a punt last year, right?
Yeah,
I feel like
I think that's.
I was trying to think like if we could predict which like big guy was going to do something that everyone's like,
I wish
But
I in
my
front of
mind
me
immediately went to
had.
Lee Hunter again.
Yeah, I wish I had what the skill stuff was last year in front of me, but because I know they did a few things. And I unfortunately don't remember what they all were in part because I wasn't there, so it was all secondhand via Twitter. But
Yeah.
yeah, really big guys doing anything. I'd like to see like I don't even know. I'd like to see like John Walker get a carry. Like let's hand off to John Walker and see what he can do. I know they won't do anything like that, but I just let's have some fun.
Yeah, we'll have a defensive tackle lineup as a fullback, and then it's always my favorite thing that ever happened. Like it happens in the NFL a lot. Well, not a lot, but sometimes. And it's just like whenever they go out of the backfield and catch, they're always all like wide open because no one's like, he's not going to do anything.
Why would you ever?
It's
Yeah.
always a wide open touchdown. It's the best thing ever. All right, defense. Obviously we have to talk about linebackers because that's what this podcast is actually about. I'm very intrigued.
I'm very intrigued about this one.
It's just an entire group of transfers and then a couple of the young guys. And
which I've said this a few times. Excuse me. I've said this a few times, but every time I look at the list of possible players who we might see at linebacker, it never ceases to impress me how many potential linebackers they brought in through the portal. And I still don't fully understand how they convinced all these guys to come to the same school. It kind of blows my mind. Like there are so many guys who could be potentially high-level linebackers from this year, and I'm very excited they finally solved that. Still not totally sure how they did it, but just have to give them a shout out for that again.
And if you want to read into press conferences, which we can do, just because,
of course,
why not? Ted Roof spoke last week and was asked about how he sees like everything shaking out. And he did say like he hasn't seen anybody separate themselves. He's like, sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes I don't know. It's like he was just all right, Ted Roof. But he listed players at each of the like linebacker positions. Like at will linebacker, he said Deshaun Pace. And I don't know if there was anything to the order of how he said them, but it kind of feels like
it seems suspicious. The order he said the names in seemed a little suspicious.
Like that could be the depth chart. So like at will, he said Deshaun Pace, Exree Alexander, and then Andrew Harris. At Mike, it was Ethan Barr, Josiah Pierre, Cam Vining, Cam Moore, Troy Ford. And then at Sam, it was Ladarius Tennyson, who's listed still on the roster as a defensive back.
I think Deshaun Pace, I don't know if he was listed on the roster, but he was brought in as a DB. Yeah, and I remember you and I both were confused both about him and Tennyson because we thought they were both coming in as linebackers, then got announced as DBs.
Yeah,
so
he's listed. Well, I thought Tennyson was a safety. And then
Tennyson was. I'm gonna butcher this.
I thought he was one of the. Or I thought it was him, or it might have been Josiah Pierre that I thought was a hybrid, like linebacker safety. He was a linebacker.
So no, Tennyson was at Ole Miss. Tennyson was a straight up hybrid. He started out as a safety at Ole Miss, and they transitioned him to linebacker, and he was good at linebacker. So then when UCF brought him in, I was like, oh, that makes sense. But then they announced him as a safety.
Yeah, and on the roster, he's still listed as a defensive back.
Yeah,
and and Pace is listed as a linebacker, if that means anything, but.
No one told Ted Roof these things since he's apparently just, which to be fair, it's like, it's not like the coaches are typing in on the website. So, I mean, they're going to put players, like I said, it's also the weird thing that we've talked about a couple times about how, and I don't know what was or wasn't orchestrated. So maybe I'm off base here, but UCF made all of their defensive portal additions and then hired Ted Roof and then demoted Addison. Yeah. So it was sort of this weird thing of Ted Roof then comes in and maybe players aren't going to be used exactly how they were presented to UCF initially, you know?
And yeah, and the way, and again, who knows if the way he listed these has any bearing, but I would not be surprised if they start out with Pace at will, Barr at Mike, and then Tennyson at Sam.
Yeah.
Like it seems like it is kind of suspicious because like,
I'm not trying to buy into the spring hype that every single fan base in America buys into because listen, guys, there are 134 teams and none of them are upset right now. They're all just hearing about how great spring is going and the guys are showing their hustle and their talent, blah blah blah. But what you just listed sounds great to me. Like that sounds like actually good.
Well, what's crazy to me is like it's obviously, and that was perhaps our clearest answer, clearest insight into this being a different defense because for the last few years now, it's been UCS played more of I think a 3-4, or they've had those hybrid roles where it's like they play with so many DBs on the field. There's usually only 2 linebackers on the field, and they didn't even have 2 good ones last year. And now he lists the Will, the Mike, and the Sam. And you're like, yeah, that sounds like it'd be fine. Like I don't know, we'll see. But you're like, they've brought in enough players to be like they can fit. That's probably why they brought in so many. I don't know. Because they brought Roof in after, so maybe that's not. I mean, they probably brought in a lot because
it's one of those things.
A lot, but
what did they do after, and what did they announce after? Did UCF know that like actually Ted Roof hadn't even been fired yet by Oklahoma, I don't think. So some of this they definitely didn't know that they were getting Ted Roof, but I think that I think we've all come to understand that everyone was in agreement that Addison was not going to continue as DC while they were making these additions. So you never know.
Yeah, and it's just the fact that they brought in this many where they have like they need 3 starters now, and it's like. It seems like they could have something here. We talked about that, I think, weeks ago about like they should have enough players here now that enough of them should be at least good or decent.
And it's what we've said a million times is you don't need to hit on all of them. You don't. You just brought in so many, you just need to hit on a couple of them, and that can make all the difference, and hopefully they have. And there are guys on the roster, like Andrew Harris. He mentioned him, not if that is a depth chart, which, like I said, the way he said it certainly sounded like it, then he's maybe not high on it, but still someone we might eventually start seeing more of.
Same with Troy Ford, Cam Moore. Those guys were like down like toward the end of what he was listing, but it really did. He mentioned
it was a depth chart.
It was a depth.
It was a depth chart. I actually think it's hilarious. I don't think we've ever had a defense coordinator or head coach at UCF accidentally give the depth chart at a position before, but we did get that, and I'm liking it. So
yeah. Last position on this first topic we'll talk about, who's running with the ones and twos, is the DBs, and this one I'm way fuzzier on.
Your guess is as good as mine as what the hell is going to happen here, especially since shout out to Pace and Tennyson for apparently not being DBs. So I guess we can remove them from this category. What happens when Xavier Williams starts the spring game?
I will be very impressed.
I will be too.
But there's just, again, this is another position where there's so many guys where like Brandon Adams has been here for 3 years now, or is it 4? So he was here in 2021.
3. 2021 right? Was his freshman year, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. Okay. So then this would be his 4th year.
I'm an idiot.
21, 22, 23. Yeah.
Sorry, guys. Basic math, not my thing.
I remember predicting, so that's when we did predictions back then. I predicted every week that he would get an interception. Yep. And then he finally did in one of practices earlier this spring. So they got Brandon Adams. Antoine Jackson's the guy they brought in from ECU. I believe he's a corner. And again, this is one of those things that we'll actually get a chance to look at how they're using these guys, because on the roster, they list them all as defensive backs. So
it's not like it matters really, but you see it, like not all schools do that, and that has annoyed me for years. That's the thing, going back multiple administrations, multiple coaches, is UCF always they're the least descriptive possible. They just have DBs, they just have D linemen, they just have offensive linemen. Like I don't know, it's
weird. A lot of schools do that, and at the NFL Combine, they had just DB, and I was like, I need to know if I need to know if there's a safety in the corner.
Well, yeah, that seems kind of important. I don't know if part of it is just because they don't want to like box players in as like, you know, like players might move around, or like, especially like NFL, like they might play somewhere else at the next level. I don't know. I just, it frustrates me when I'm trying to break down a roster and I can't even, you know.
But from what I could gather, I mean, the guys that you're probably looking at corner, Brandon Adams, Antoine Jackson, and then Braden Marshall, I played a lot of nickel last year as the guy in the slot. Safety, Nikai Martinez and Damari Henderson, like that feels like
Quadric Bullard's still in there too, right?
Quadric Bullard. I was actually this is somebody I forgot about when we were talking about this a couple weeks ago, but I don't know why. When I read his name on the roster, I was like, "Why he could be a surprise portal entry?" Because really? I don't know. Is he going to start over some of these other guys?
Do you think he'd portal if he's not going to start? I mean, all these guys are going to play.
Is he going to play? He's going to play. I mean, I don't know. If he doesn't feel like he's going to play a lot, if he only has 1 year left.
Let me throw another name at you. Brian, we never learned how to pronounce his last name. Threats,
yeah.
The Cincy transfer. That's another one.
Yeah.
So
another one who's going to transfer, another one who's
just another name in that mix.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, I'm very curious how that group shakes out. But yeah, Quadric Bullard's this is so bad. I feel like we heard something about him the last couple of weeks, but I can't remember what it was. That was probably a dumb thing to just announce on the podcast. We heard something about Quadric. Don't know if it was good or bad or even what it was. The name just ringed a bell in my head. So
another random, like, you just look, because there's so many of these guys. And who was the one? I actually forgot to add this in the news. Was it Jarvis Ware who just entered the portal?
Jarvis Ware entered the portal.
Ware entered the portal. But there are still so many other names that you're kind of like, we don't know much about them, but could they be taking a net stick? Like, he was a freshman last year. Jason Duclona.
Yeah.
He was one of the, like, I don't want to say like lower rated, but he was toward the bottom of that class last year, wasn't he?
Yep.
But like he's another guy. Jakari's another guy who was injured.
Jakari's been a weird one because there's been some odd injury history with him, and I don't know. Yeah. I don't totally know what's going on there. There were weird rumblings about him for a while, just about what the injury was or how serious it was. But yeah. He's in that mix too.
Jamaric Morris, redshirt junior, another
Forgot
one.
About
William
him.
Wells, I feel like is another one who's been here for 6 or 7 years.
Yeah.
And then, like you mentioned, Xavier Williams, who was a quarterback until, I don't know, a few weeks ago.
Yep. Until the start of spring ball, I believe.
There are so many players there.
That's a lot, which is a good thing. But you're right. Maybe when we've talked about surprise portal entries, we haven't talked enough about DB just because there is so much there that you want. And we have already seen one. I mean, Jarvis Ware is unfortunate. He came in with a lot of hype and then just injuries and everything else. He never really put it together. But yeah, I don't know.
I also wonder, too, with that position, we thought this last year. I think there were a lot of names going into spring ball, and then after spring ball, they added DeCorian Patterson.
Yeah.
And it's like,
who then ended up just kind of as like a nice rotational piece more than anything.
Yeah.
But
it was
I think they wanted more from him there.
Yeah, and so I don't know. Maybe there could be some of these positions where like there are a lot of guys there, and then the coaching staff decides there are a lot of guys, but none of them are that good. So.
Let's predict it right now. What's the DeCorian Patterson position of this year? What's the position that we're not worried about that after spring ball they're randomly going after? I have one, but I want you to go first.
Let me think through the positions. Because like I don't know. I think there are a lot of questions on a lot of positions. Quarterback.
Yeah. Quarterback?
I don't know.
Oh, I thought you were being. I don't know why I didn't read that as a joke. You said that, and it's clearly a joke, and I was just like, "Wow, tell me more about why this is your take."
Tight end, maybe.
Okay, I could see tight end because they've got Randy, they've got Kylan, who's a true freshman. They have the other two that came in. The one guy's name I can't remember, even though I think he's
Michigan State was one of them.
Yeah, I could see tight end.
What's your answer? I'm trying to.
It's a hot take, and I could be totally off base. I'm going to say offensive line.
Oh, I see. I would have thought that, but I didn't think that was one that was like. I don't know. I didn't think that was on the board because I thought that would be one.
You think that one's too obvious?
Yeah, like I kind of think it would be just because I was looking at it today. It's like they have enough centers, obviously.
Yeah.
Do they have like? And I asked earlier, like, do they have enough tackles? And do they have enough guards?
That's what I'm thinking because it seems like the fan base in particular seems pretty at ease with that position, and it's more just how's the center battle going. But they brought in Wes Dorsey for presumably like one of the tackle spots, and we haven't heard anything about him. So, and that doesn't mean maybe he just hasn't been. I don't know, but that one makes me wonder a little bit.
And I do wonder too of that group, the trio that's at center. Obviously, and it's not always the case, but one of those guys could kick into guard, like if they need him to.
That's true.
So
that's true.
Maybe that happens. So maybe they do have enough,
especially with guard, I think Herb Hand has more than made clear that he's just going to pick the 5 guys who are the best, and then we'll figure out the positions later. Which I called out a lot last year as insanity, but then it worked pretty freaking well all season. So
they had a great offensive line last year.
It's such a weird strategy to just straight up say we're just going to pick the 5 guys and we'll worry about the positions later. Like it sounds like lunacy because there are so many intricacies between those different positions. But if it ain't broke,
I do wonder too because this is something that happens, and this is. I think even like just what I've noticed with the Bucs draft strategies and stuff is like they like guys that can play multiple positions. So I wonder if that's like a thing with Herb Hand where it's like, yeah, that's his philosophy. So he looks for guys that when maybe he recruits them as a guard, but he's like, oh, he can play center. He recruits them as a tackle. I was like, well, he could kick in because last year we thought Marcellus Marshall was a tackle, didn't we?
Yeah.
And then he ended up playing guard.
Yeah.
So I think he does just like to go after those guys, and if they're talented enough, and if they're versatile, then they can make it work. So I think that's kind of just how he looks at it. It's his philosophy with it. But so I think we can move through to our next thing that's always fun. And this is like what you mentioned, how there's always a player who stands out. Sometimes it's a younger guy where it's like they stand out and you're like, that's the guy you're talking about after. This question more specifically is which newcomer will stand out, or newcomers, multiple, between the transfers and there's some early enrollees that you could look at. But it's hard. It's sometimes hard in the spring games that usually that guy feels like it's always going to be a skill position player.
I was literally about to say, I'll bet you anything it's going to be a skill position player because it has to be someone that you're going to notice. And there other positions, the general fan base just isn't going to really, even if the linebackers are playing out of their minds, that's not really something that is going to be top of mind for the fan base.
That's what I wondered. Like the name that I want to just be like, I don't know, just go out on a limb is like if Antoine Jackson gets a pick or something like that. Like
yeah,
really nice
that's
pick.
true. Like a really impressive interception that'll get people hyped up. But I don't know. I'm struggling with this one. First off, I'm just banning us from saying KJ for this because
that doesn't count.
Obvious one.
Well, he's another topic that we're going to get to. So
I'm talking more about someone who we're maybe not talking about a ton now, who then people will be like, ooh, interesting after the spring game.
I don't know if this will count for the spring game, but someone I'm curious to see and that I feel like forget about too much because he is a newcomer, but he's not a newcomer. Is Derek LeBlanc?
Yeah, he is a newcomer. You can count him as a newcomer. He wasn't eligible last year. Yeah.
So he's somebody that I think probably gets forgotten because he was ineligible last year and transferred in late. And I think he'll be a part of that defensive tackle rotation. I mean, they're stacked there. So I don't know that he's going to start, but it's to have 4 or 5 guys that you can rotate through is huge.
This is where recruiting gets misleading because Derek LeBlanc is a guy who, if he had signed with UCF literally 2 months before he actually did, it would have been headline news. And we're talking all about the hype for him. And now he's going to be a foundational piece for what UCF wants to build. But instead he went to Oklahoma first and came to UCF 2 months later. So it was just like, UCF got a transfer. Like, it's so weird how quickly that flips in your mind, where if a young player transfers into your school, even if they quite literally just signed out of high school, it is not as big of a deal. And yeah, I think fans have totally forgotten about him. I'm guilty of that too. I keep forgetting he exists, but yeah, I can absolutely. Now you're right. I don't think anyone's going to notice him in the spring game and be like, wow, that D lineman had a strong day. But
yeah, Other thing, this is completely off topic, but other thing I keep forgetting is that Ricky Barber's back.
Ricky Barber is back. That is very exciting.
Completely, for some reason, my mind was like, "Oh yeah, he left." No, he's back.
Ricky
Yeah,
Barber,
it's
Lee
him,
Hunter, and John Walker. That's fun. That's very
and presumably
fun.
Derek LeBlanc.
And presumably, I just did it. I just did it. I just said that I'm guilty of it. You said let's switching topics, and then I immediately omitted it.
I can't wait till he's like elite. Like he just has like from as a rotational defense tackle has like 4 or 5 sacks.
I was doing this with Townsend 2 years ago. I don't know why I always pick one player that I just, if you were listening to the podcast back then, we had multiple conversations where we'd list out every wide receiver and I'd say, that's the room. And then 5 minutes go by and Bailey's like, we didn't talk about Xavier Townsend. I don't know why.
Yeah.
I don't know. And then he ended up being pretty good. So this is probably a good omen for Derek LeBlanc.
But so if we're going back to this, like if it's going to be a skill position player like Miles Montgomery, running back, or there could be like some of the receivers. It could be Goldie Lawrence, maybe. I don't know. It could be like from as far as the early enrollees, like I would almost be surprised if we didn't see Bradell make a big play. Which maybe I'm building that up for like too much because
I feel like we've taken like one really cool highlight way too far with him at this point. But whatever, we'll just keep writing it. But yeah,
Kylan.
It's going to be. I'll tell you right now, it's going to be a receiver or a running back, or I guess a tight end. Okay, well, I'm just listing all the skill positions now, but that was a bad take. But I don't know. If you need me to pick one name, it could be a backup quarterback. Yeah, it could be.
I don't know.
If it is, I think it'll be Risk, who isn't new, so that one probably doesn't fit. But I'm gonna stick with Miles Montgomery. He's gonna be my pick because I think it's really easy for a running back to excite the fan base because all it takes is 1 or 2 big plays. And given that we're kind of in wait and see mode on who RB2 is, I can see the fan base getting excited about that.
This is another one that, and I don't know how they did it last year, and the way they did in the scrimmage the other day is maybe how they'll do is KJ wasn't live, but the other quarterbacks were. And in that case, did they do that last year? Do you know or no?
I don't, but I'd have a hard time seeing any of the quarterbacks being live. I don't think typically any of them are for a spring game.
Oh, okay. Well, then never mind. Then this is going to completely negate what I was going to say because I'm still really intrigued by Dalen Dotson, the guy they got from UT Martin, defensive end.
Yeah.
I don't know that what we'll see from a spring game at that position, but that's another guy.
What position hates spring games the most? Is it DE?
Probably because you can't sack quarterbacks. So you're like, all right, you can just. I mean, if you make a good move, cool. Like it's a would-be sack, but it's like, all right, it's not the same feeling as taking a quarterback down.
It's not even remote. You just can't make an impact at all. Like a sack in a spring game is the most anticlimactic thing ever. Like usually you can't even really figure out what happened. There's just a blur of bodies and a whistle, and it's like they did it.
That's probably the case. Any other freshmen? I'm trying to think. There's like some defensive guys that, again, if they make like a play out of nowhere, like Jacob Good.
I don't think it's going to be a defensive guy. I don't think that the average fan cares.
No.
That sounds mean, but I think for football in general, it's just,
And that's why, like...
You're watching the ball,
Yeah, no one's going to care. I will watch at some points, like, just watch the offensive and defensive line. Like, I want to see Walt Claire Flynn and see how he is or how ready he is. But
you're very excited about Walt Claire Flynn. Were you texting me about him the other day? That make that up?
So yeah, I did.
I was kind of trying to bring you back down to earth. You were like, "I'm so ready to see Walt Claire Flynn," and I was like, "I don't know if you're going to be seeing him this year, but that's
great." And I said, "I don't need to." I was like, "I don't need to. I just want to see him in the spring game, and then if he plays next year, like I'm just excited about his future."
You're always like that. You always just pick one player, and I can never totally tell what it is about them that you decide.
I'm curious. Who else has that been?
I don't know. Brandon Adams. You like 2 years ago. You're just Brandon Adams.
I don't know why that was the case either. I can't even give you one other than that's my last name.
Greg McCrae before that. Did you pick Brandon Adams because it was your last name? Was that how you?
I don't think so, but I can't remember why I did.
I just feel like you have
playing really well. I think when he was a freshman, he was playing well, and I kept thinking like, oh, he's going to get a pick one of these days.
Yeah, Walt Claire's definitely jumped the list because we literally have not seen him for 1 second at the college level, and you're like, can't wait for Walt Claire Flynn.
He's the highest rated offensive line recruit in school history. So
he is.
And I love offensive line play. So
I just think it's great to see this kind of excitement for a center. I think that's great.
Well, I used to play center when back in my Pop Warner days, so
okay.
I like centers, but yeah, I don't know. Does Greg McCrae count? Because Greg McCrae was like my original like.
I don't know if I can
at UCF. I think.
Yeah, I don't know if it counts or not because I also was right there with you. I still think he's arguably my favorite UCF player ever, so I feel like I can't get after you for that one. But you were early on the Greg McCrae train for sure. I think you were one of the first people I knew who was really excited about him.
I don't even remember why.
This is what I'm saying. There's never a reason where you're like, well, because of this. It's just you will pick a player and say, I am so in on this player. And they've worked out. It was Greg McCrae who ended up being one of the better running backs in program history. It was Brandon Adams, who's been a starter for 3 years now. And it's Walt Claire Flynn, UCF's future all-star center.
so it's always been that. It's like these are the players that I'm drawn to. But then it's like when it comes time to pick like breakout player of the year, I always get it wrong.
Yeah.
That's a different thing, though.
It's tough. And I think my issue is I do the opposite of you, where every year I just pick players I really don't like. Just get really frustrated.
You formulate a take on this player and you're like, I'm sticking to this take. And then a lot of times it will work out.
Golden Boomer, man. I was unfortunately very ahead of the times on that one, and I wish I had not been.
Is that something we're not talking about? I mean, it's a spring game, so it doesn't really.
It doesn't matter.
If he goes out there and he misses like 4 kicks in a spring game,
are they even going to do field goals in this game? Are they going to do that?
I don't know. I haven't been to a spring game since. I went a couple. What was the really, really hot one a couple years ago? They did it on like a Saturday, like noon.
2020.
Yeah, I think was it that one? Yeah,
I'm certain it was 2021.
Yeah, that was brutal.
Could have been 2020 though. One of those. Did they do a spring game in 2020? Probably not.
No,
absolutely not. Of course not. What am I talking about? Yeah.
That's why I think it was 2022 though. I'm thinking I went to that spring game.
I think it might have been 2022. It's so stupid in my brain. I'm trying to remember if it was QR code or handle on the back of the jersey.
I think it was QR. It was QR code.
That was 2022.
Because I was trying to scan them from the stands and I couldn't do it.
That one I do remember for being very hot. I don't know what the weather was that day, but it was awful. I'm so glad they do these at night now. This will be the first one I get to go to because they just started that last year and I obviously wasn't there, but I'm very ready for it.
It doesn't matter for you.
What? Because if I'm covering
if it's hot outside.
That's a good point.
You're like, I'm so glad they do them at night.
Why didn't I cover the spring game in 2020? I haven't covered a spring game in a long time, to be honest with you.
Wait, you didn't in 2022?
I usually go as a fan. I can't remember the last spring game I covered.
I think you covered it in 2022.
I'm certain I didn't because I remember who.
Then did you not go? Well, because we did. I thought we did a podcast. I went to the game. I drove up for the game, but I sat by myself. So
you know what? I did cover it. I'm thinking of 2021. I did not cover 2021. I'm certain of that. I absolutely went to 2021.
I don't even remember 20. So yeah, I don't know. All right, let's get back on track. Our last piece here, and it's just mostly it's going to be some quarterbacks, but it's mostly KJ Jefferson. Just more so our first look at KJ Jefferson as UCF's QB1. Of all the talk, there's been no intrigue. Like we know basically what we have at quarterback for the first time in a few years, but it's still going to be exciting to see him play.
This is going to go one of two ways, and it's going to completely and fully be one of these two ways. It's going to either be that KJ just looks fine or meh, and fans panic and go on, oh my God, we were so wrong about him. He looks just like John Rice Plumlee. What's the difference? Or he's going to have exactly 2 big plays and the fan base is going to go into Heisman hype mode. And it will be one of those 2 things. Those are the only 2 options. The fan base is either going way up or way down. I don't think they're going to stay where they're at. Because there's no one spring games are worse for than quarterbacks because the games don't really mean anything, but the fan base is going to fully form their opinion that they're going to hold for the next 4 months based on what you do in those 2 quarters.
Yeah, and for all we've just previewed here, and like we'll get onto the rest of the quarterback stuff, but we probably should have made more of a point at the top. It's like it's just we're talking about this because it's like it's a
fun.
Spring game.
Yeah,
it's fun. It's not everything because 2 years ago in that 2022 spring game, it was the whole Mikey versus JRP, and they both threw for like I want to say two something yards, like 4 touchdowns, something like that, and. Again, they're not live, so it's like KJ not being live. Like some of the plays that he would make with his legs, like he might make some, but it's like they can't tackle him anyway, so we don't know when he would have. It's all.
I very specifically remember, unless I'm wrong, that in the 2022 spring game, Mikey threw a pick and John Rice Plumlee didn't, and that was a talking point for several months among the fan base, which is hilarious.
Even though Mikey threw like 4 touchdowns at the same time, I think, or no, he might have thrown 3. I feel like JRP might have had 4.
Yeah, but I just remember that one of them had a pick and one didn't, and it was a talking point for months about, wow, he had that pick in the sprint. Like, we got to do a better job of not doing that with the spring games, even though I know we're going to anyway. But I'm excited to see KJ, and it does suck that, which I want to be clear, we keep saying with his legs. I hope that, I don't think that KJ seems to be more the type of quarterback, or at least he was at Arkansas, where it's more that he's going to make plays happen with his legs when things break down. Like, I don't know if there's just going to be like design run after design run for KJ. So I hope that fans are kind of ready
short
for
yardage.
that.
I think probably there will be, but maybe not.
Yeah, I agree with that, but I don't like because he's just built different than John Rice Plumlee. It's not like those plays where they spread the field open and he's just going to dash downfield for like 70 yards. I think it's more about his ability to extend plays and make things happen when the initial play isn't there. And like you said, in short yardage situations, like 3rd and 3, hell yeah. But so I just hope fans are kind of ready for that.
This is going to age terribly, but I feel like they're going to be so good in the red zone this year on offense. Like, how do you not get in the end zone? If you're like inside the 10 with RJ and KJ, how do you not get in the end zone?
And Kobe. Just those 3 players. Those 3 players. How are you going to not
Pittman,
score? Sure.
Red zone guy, yeah.
But first off, let's preface this with they've been off and on terrible in the red zone the whole time the staff has been here. So worth keeping in mind.
Usually, but
yeah.
Yeah. No,
Gus
I
heard
just
me
have
say and
visions.
Kobe, and he finished the sentence with throwing the ball in the red zone.
I have visions of KJ just racking up like 8 rushing touchdowns, all from like the 5 yard line, like Daryl Mack in the conference championship game that one year. Just like every time they get
Well,
down there, it's just
do you not remember
running.
that in 2019 they'd get in the red zone and Gabriel would come out and Mac would go in to do the exact same play,
Yeah, I forgot about
and it
that.
worked. It
Yeah,
worked. He was good for 4 or 5 yards over and over again.
yeah. But then so the other thing about not just about KJ, but the quarterback position is kind of the quarterbacks behind them and what we're going to see from them
Yeah,
because there's been a lot of talk, and then Brandon Helwig was the one who had put something out there, I think on Twitter the other day about Dylan Risk having a really good spring.
yeah,
And
which
so if we
is
start to
interesting.
see, and we've talked since KJ committed about Timmy McClain probably being somebody who's going to transfer.
Yeah,
He hasn't yet, but I wonder if this is the final. Like, if it's clear coming out of the spring game that they're looking at Dylan Risk more as the QB2, he's gone. Like that's got to be the last bit, right?
I mean, I don't want to
I've
jump
said
to
even
conclusions
before,
from one Brandon Helwig tweet, but I also think
yeah,
that among UCF media, there might not be anyone who knows more than him about what's going on. And if that take is out there, it might mean that that's the way things are headed. And that, yeah, I mean, if you were when we just assumed that Timmy had QB2 locked up, I think we were still assuming he'd be moving on. If there's actual pressure behind him, then I don't know why he'd stay.
yeah, and I think I've said this before on the podcast, and it's pure speculation, but I've almost wondered if him staying this spring has been about just like accumulating a little bit more film
Could
for like
be.
practice film and stuff to say, hey, I'm available in the portal. I don't know. It feels
More than
like
more than that, it's also waiting around for because there are teams right now who are going through spring
right,
ball and they're in their pressers talking about how great the team's playing, and privately they're going, "Oh my god, we don't have a quarterback." So
right.
there will be teams in the
No,
market who weren't a couple months ago.
it'll be interesting, but I am excited to see Dylan because I don't know, just we haven't seen enough of him yet, and so I think for him having been in the system now for a year and having a chance to throw the ball a little more because we saw him a little bit in a couple games last year, and it was just game where Dylan came in. I think it was just probably I think he might have thrown a couple passes, but it was just like handoffs. So getting a chance to actually see him, and then I don't know how deep they'll go with the quarterback. Like I don't know if we'll see a lot of Riley or not, but it'd be
I don't
cool if
know
we
either.
could
I don't know either. I bet they won't go more than at least for meaningful
because it's
plays. I
only a
don't think they'll
half,
go
isn't it?
more than
Yeah, and
three
they
deep. Yeah,
can't really.
it's a
It's only a
half.
half, so
I am because the other thing, and this is so not a conversation to be having in April of 2024, but it's stupid that in the last couple weeks I've started to get nervous about the quarterback position for 2025 because which is stupid because what would have been the point of doing this exact thing last year, because KJ Jefferson was never on my radar as someone who would have even been available through the portal, let alone that they could land. But I don't know, I just feel like the fan base defaulted very quickly to hell yeah, EJ Colson reclassified and he's awesome, so he'll be the guy. I think it could be Risk. I think we've said that on the podcast before. I think that
mhm.
maybe he'll be our new Mikey and we'll just go all in on him and demand that he start no matter what. But I really like that already there is a guy who could be the guy in 2025 who's showing flashes now. I think that's super encouraging. Doesn't mean they're not going to go portal shopping. They probably should and they will, but
Mhm.
you don't hate hearing that.
Yeah, I mean, and then that's the thing is like the fact that there are going to be 3 young quarterbacks, presumably at least going into next year with Riley too, is like
Yeah.
they're going to have options, and then yeah, maybe they will go portal shopping for more of a veteran guy. Like we kind of thought they might do this year, where it was like maybe they're going to get a guy who's going to come in and compete for it, but he's not going to be like a star, like a surefire quarterback. And then KJ became available. They got KJ, so
I think fans
that
are going
could
to
be what we
hate this
see.
take, but the top programs in college football are more and more starting to move away from high school recruiting when it comes to quarterbacks and more wait around and see what the portal offerings are. And that might be more the way college football as a whole is going. I mean, we talk so much about the young guys, this and that for quarterbacks. We might be
Mm-hmm.
moving into a world where every portal offseason, UCF is going to take a shot at some quarterback, and if they get him, they're going to roll with him. And I think you
Yeah,
have to do that if you're the coaching staff. Like, I don't think anyone's arguing that if they had not landed KJ, things would have probably been fine. They would have gone after someone else. They would have found an okay quarterback, but not someone as good as KJ. And no matter who is in the room, you have to take that shot if someone like that
yeah.
is available and interested in you. So they'll probably just have to keep doing that.
I think they probably will, but I think at the same time there will be a balance of like you as a coaching staff. I'm sure you would like to have a guy who's if he's a starter and you give him a chance and he's really good, he has and then you run the risk of him transferring, but you at least have a guy who has multiple years of eligibility where you don't feel like every year you're going to have to be like, all right, we got to find a starting
But
quarterback.
you
So
have to do it every year anyway. Because if we
yeah,
say that EJ Colson's awesome, or let's go with Risk since he's the one we're hearing stuff about now. Say that Risk is takes over in 2025 and is awesome. Throws like 33 touchdowns to 8 picks or something. Has a great season. UCF's good. How do you know he's still going to be there in 2026? How do you know that Oregon's not going to come calling, or Ohio State, or some team with a huge check that you just can't match? I mean, there is no guarantee, whether they're young, whether they're a transfer or high school, there is no guarantee past one season.
I had a dumb thought just now, and it makes no sense, so I'm going to say it. I was like, oh, I feel like I would be less worried about that with risk because you have like how much he was like UCF's my dream school, but it was like Matt Lee happened.
Yeah.
So
Matt Lee really blew the doors off of that one. And I know that fans get mad, particularly at Matt Lee. I think that's still a thing. And it, I'm not thrilled about it. I can say that he's probably the only UCF transfer ever that when I would see on TV, I'd feel kind of bitter, which is sort of a lame thing to say, but I've never,
even then I would have done the same thing as him. Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. I've never it sucks if you're a UCF fan, but I think that we all need to stop acting like the way that players shouldn't operate in their lives the way we operate in ours. I think pretty much everyone listening to this would, if your job's offering you, I'm just making up numbers, but say that you're at a job right now and you make I don't know. Give me a salary, Bailey. I don't have to come up with a salary. You come up with one. I don't know what income bracket we're going for here.
$49,000.
Make $49,000, and you love this job. You grew up. I don't know. Your parents worked here before you. Love this place, and some other job comes along and says, "We'll pay you $110,000 to work here." You're gonna leave.
Yeah, exactly.
That's it. I just, and that's fine. That's the way a market works.
That's why it's always funny hearing people I say fans use the criticism, but like Nick Saban was all out there talking about it recently about how he hates how it's become about how much you're getting paid. It's that's every job, every field ever. And I know that wasn't always the case because you're in college, but it's still then you're getting into the territory of you're probably one of these people that doesn't think they should be getting paid, but it's why
but it also
don't
wasn't
need to
the
open
case.
that, but
it artificially wasn't the case. People talk about how players used to be loyal. They were loyal because they were forced to be a player. And think of it's crazy how we just went along with this for almost a century, because it's actually crazy that a high school, if you're a high schooler, if you're even a very good high schooler, 4-star, 5-star, 3-star, whatever, that single decision is going to alter and affect the rest of your life, because you just have to pick a school and say, I hope this coach is telling the truth. And then if you get on campus 2 months later and whoops, he lied, none of this is accurate. He doesn't think I'm any good. I'm just here for depth. There's nothing you can do about it. And that's just, you ruined your one chance. And so players weren't loyal, they were trapped. And I'm not saying things have definitely swung too far in the other direction. I think that they need to implement some kind of, we're moving towards contracts. I think everyone knows that. That's been reported by The Athletic, by Dellinger, by everyone, that we're probably a couple years away from. It sounds so foreign now, but you'll see a headline like UCF has, you would see a couple years ago, okay, UCF has signed top 100 player John Walker to a 2-year, $300,000 contract. And that'll feel normal in a few years. It sounds insane now, but it'll feel normal.
It does. It's funny. It's just funny how this is all gone. I had something I was going to say, but forgot what it was. So let's just move on. It really isn't football news this week. I didn't have anything that I usually try to throw something in there, but we already mentioned Jarvis Ware transferring, and I didn't have anything else. So we'll go on to game of the week, which is once again UCF baseball. They're up to number 17 in the D1 baseball rankings this week. They won their series this past weekend against Kansas State. They're now 21-8, 8-7 in the Big 12. They're on the road this weekend at West Virginia, who is 19-12, 8-4 in the Big 12. Those games are Friday at 6:30, Saturday at 4, and Sunday at 1. West Virginia currently leads the Big 12. It's again, I mentioned this last week, is the disparity of games played so far. It just makes it difficult. Where them and Oklahoma are leading it at 8-4, and then there are a few 7-5 teams, and then so they've all played 12 games. And there's UCF and Texas Tech, who have the best records in the conference overall, but they both played 15 conference games. They're both 8-7, so they're more middle of the pack. So that'll all even out eventually. But they keep winning series the way they are. I think they've won 4 Big 12 series in a row, and it's big. And I guess in West Virginia, I did not think West Virginia would be a good baseball. I don't know them to be a great baseball program, but they're good this year, I guess. And it's gonna be a tough road matchup. If they can get 2 out of 3, I'll be thrilled.
I just get upset when I see UCF baseball's record, because every time I see how good they're doing, all I can think to myself is, think how much better they would be if Joe Girardi had accepted the job.
Shout out Rich Wallace.
Who should have been the hire from the start and is absolutely a home run hire so far, and thrilled about that. Also, what the hell was Lovelady doing the last few years? Can I say that? What was he doing?
I don't know, but I don't know. College baseball is weird.
They are in a new conference as well, so it's not a 1-to-1.
It's also just very strange. I don't know I can't point to really what went wrong with Loveladies. They were never, I don't think they were ever bad. It's just, they were just kind of middling, middle of the road, just outside the bubble, whatever. And I know people are skeptical of this season so far just because of that. Like they've seen years where UCF starts 15-5 and then kind of peters off. But like this is the first time I think since 2017, Lovelady's first year, that they've gotten this far into a season looking like they have well, that's actually not true because there were a couple seasons where they were right on the bubble near the end of it. But it's like this far into the season, I don't think it's like, oh, I mean, they could fall off, but it's like
it feels
I think they're a good team. Like I think they're a good team, and we had maybe some smoke and mirrors in the past couple of years with that, but
it also feels like they would not have gotten this deep into the season. Like it would have started the cracks
against the teams they're playing too.
Yeah,
like and then the other thing was like midweek games they've been on. I think
that was always the thing.
Still undefeated midweek.
That or close to it. But that was always the thing with Lovelady. What it wasn't like, oh, they can't hang with like East Carolina. It was like they would go drop games to like FAU or whoever. Well, no, I know, but I'm saying like it wasn't even the expected one. I know FAU's got a good baseball program, but those were the ones that would bother me the most. And like if you've listened to this podcast for any length of time, you know that I defer to Bailey on a lot of this stuff because baseball is not a sport that I understand very well. It's not a sport I've ever watched very much. So UCF baseball is definitely, of the major UCF sports, probably the one I'm the least informed on. But I still launch these takes anyway. And I'm glad that Rich Wallace is doing well.
That's why it's always been tough because baseball in Florida is just, it's a good, like most programs.
Everyone's pretty good in Florida. Yeah.
So, but just to go through like their midweek games, like they beat Miami on the road, then they beat FAU on the road, and then they had that was actually a weekend series with USF. They won 2 out of 3. Then they beat Florida on the road, and it's just every week. Stetson was another team I think they lost to last year, maybe. Or maybe I'm thinking about basketball. But Stetson's actually good in baseball. I think Stetson might have made a regional last year.
It seriously feels like every single Florida program is good at baseball.
They beat FAU again. They beat Jacksonville, who has been good. Another Florida baseball program that's good. They beat. I don't think Bethune-Cookman's usually good. They beat Bethune-Cookman 14-1 last week, and then had their game against UNF postponed. But yeah, they're undefeated right now in midweek games.
I need an explanation on why they are playing a 4-game series with Central Michigan in a couple weeks.
I don't know.
That is so odd to me.
Might just be to fill up the schedule. I really don't have a clue why that's a 4-game series. I know why it's a series with Central Michigan is because that's probably the weekend where these other teams in the Big 12 are playing their Big 12 series that they haven't played yet. How it all evens out. Like that's why they're playing like a non-conference that deep into the season. I don't know why it's a 4-game series unless it was just nothing other than they're making the trip all the way down from Michigan and
might as well make it worth it.
Let's do a 4-game series. I don't know. It's a weird thing, but
thunderstorms will be starting up by mid to end of April, so we'll see if that ends up staying a 4-game series. But I thought that was a very weird placement.
Yeah. All right. We'll do tweet of the week.
Tweet of the week. Tweet of the week this week is not so much a single tweet as more of a conversation. It's a conversation where all of the Pegasus Podcast listeners and some people who don't listen to the podcast united against me and Bailey for a take that I don't even really remember saying on the last podcast, but we'll get into it anyway. So JP Gilbert, if you're on UCF Twitter, you know who he is, and you probably love him or either hate him. It feels like everyone's somewhere on that divide. Bailey and I fall on the love him side of the spectrum. He tweeted, "I love the Pegasus Podcast. That said, by C.A. Simmons saying that conference title signage should come down and how they're less important going forward, and Bailey Adams agreeing with the take. It's the worst take I've heard in ages. Conference titles are the thing, they're forever." And I want to clarify when I say that Bailey and I were on the losing side of that argument. I went back and forth, Bailey went back and forth. I'm not saying there were only a few people on our side. There was no one on our side. Every single person who came across this thread was against us. And what I've learned in life is when you're in a situation like this where you say you believe a thing and everyone unanimously tells you that you're wrong, you need to dig in your heels and stick with it. So that's what I'm going to do. And
we'll be on the right side of history.
I genuinely think I'm right about this. And I'm going to bookmark all of this and come back in 5 years because every reply that you guys came back with, while you are correct about things like conference title games mean so much, like they matter, you never forget those, you remember them. That's all true right now. It is true right now. It's not going to be true 10 years from now when the college football playoff is set up in a way where the national champion regularly didn't win their conference title, when UCF doesn't need to win their conference to go to the playoff, when they're likely, according to Dellinger, not even going to continue to hold conference championship games. They said that's been discussed at length, of the idea of once it's a 12 or 14 team playoff, do you even need to still hold those games? It's
false.
just, they're just not. Oh yeah. Someone replied to me when I said Dellinger reported this and said false, which shouts, listen, you're committed and I respect it, but I don't know. I get what everyone's saying right now, and maybe I am just flat wrong about this, but I have a really hard time believing that in the year 2034, the who won the conference is really going to be a thing that matters. You could argue when people talk about how much it matters now, how many, like if I just queued random UCF fans and I was like 2022 season, last season before UCF was in the Big 12, who won the conference? I feel like most people would tell me TCU. because they went to the national championship game. TCU didn't win the conference. Kansas State did. No one even knows that. So it's as the playoff element of college football becomes more and more important, as we've seen these last 10 years, where now nothing matters except that, and it's going to expand even more. What happens there is what's going to matter. The conference title game is just going to be seen as the route to it more than the thing we actually remember.
And I think that's the weird thing about that conversation, that argument, was like, it was almost like we were arguing different points, because it was like, people were saying like, well, the conference title, like that's going to be most years, that's going to be their route to the playoff. It's like, that's factual, but that's not what we're talking about. Like, that's not what we're having.
Like I said, nothing, and it was such a weird situation where nothing anyone came back with was wrong. Like, it was just correct for now. I'm not talking about the 2024 season. I'm talking about the way things are going to be in 5 or 10 years, which when you're building a new part of your stadium and putting up signs that are going to be there forever, you have to think in terms past, the next 18 months.
The way it felt by the end of it was like, that's just your opinion, man. Like, that's like...
Which, to be fair, it is. And I could be totally wrong. Maybe it's going to be... Maybe when the Big 12 doesn't even hold a conference championship game anymore, UCF's going to be super excited that their name is number 1 in the standings, even if they then go out in the first round of the playoffs and the third place Big 12 team goes to the semifinals or something. Like, I don't know. Maybe that'll still be a huge thing. But
championship signage is something I don't like talking about, because it's something I see with the Rays, where I get furious every year when they hang a wild card banner. It's just like, I hate it. I don't want to talk about it. Like,
what's your banner cutoff for UCF athletics? Like, are you okay with the NIT banner for men's basketball, or is that a no-go for you?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. Because, I mean, for UCF in a basketball, like, they're not a storied basketball program. So would you rather have nothing up there?
But then
or would you rather just put their NCAAs up there? Like, I don't know. I think their criteria seems to be postseason basketball, right?
No, because I don't think they have like a CBI banner hanging up there.
No. I guess maybe just the top 2 postseason. I don't know.
Are they going to hang one
when they make that new basketball?
I was going to say, so a little bit of news. I forget what it's called, but did this happen last week? Did we talk about this in last week's podcast?
No, we didn't, but I think it happened last week.
There's a new postseason tournament coming to college basketball that's entirely organized by Fox. I completely forget the name, but it's going to feature the top 2 Big 12 teams who don't make the NCAA tournament are now contractually obligated to play in this tournament, as are the top 2 Big 10 teams and the top 2 Big East teams. There's 16 teams total. The rest are at-larges. This thing has more money and legs and contract power than the NIT, so it's effectively going to replace the NIT. This is going to become the number 2 tournament. And it's very weird, and I don't feel good about it, because it's just a straight-up money grab, and it's, again, another example of where college basketball is working more and more to cut out the mid-majors and the smaller teams. So they're now just saying, no, we're just going to make this random tournament. That's the biggest brands that didn't make the NCAA tournament. But, okay, UCF goes to that next year. They're hanging a banner for it.
Probably.
Which they might go to it. Like, first 2 teams to not make the NCAA tournament kind of feels like where UCF's going to live in the Big 12 in a lot of these years. So that doesn't feel out of the question.
Yeah, I don't know. My whole thing, and this is not UCF related, but it's like with my argument with the Rays thing is like, if you want to celebrate that you made the playoffs, cool. They made the playoffs like 5 years in a row, I think. Keep one banner, add the year to it, but don't make like a big deal of it. Like every year they have like this whole
a playoff banner where you add a number 2 versus a new banner.
Because like there's like however many banners up there, and like 3 in a row right now say like 2021 wild card, 21 they won the division, but it's like 2022 wild card, 2023 wild cards. Like, I just want this as like wild card, even if they have to do wild card at all, wild card, and then put 2011, 2000, whatever you do. Like, I just think that doing a big like ceremony for it every year when they get their face kicked in the playoffs in 2 games, it feels dumb.
But just add a year, like anything. It's how expectations change. I think 15, even 10 years ago, 10 years ago, I think that an SEC team hanging a banner for winning the Peach Bowl would have been considered normal, and I don't think you'd ever see them do that now. Like, it's just things change. So it's like, even if it's a team where, I think that's the worst part, it's when a team becomes more successful, right? Like, they make the playoff one year and it's a big deal they made the playoff, because they never do. And then when they've made the playoff but aren't winning in it like 5 years in a row, it's like, why are you hanging this freaking banner? like, it's just it's tough. Banners are forever, and it can be tough to try to nail down. Yeah, it matters now, but is it something that fans are going to still want to be seeing up there in 10 years or 20 years?
Yeah.
Which in UCF's case, it's easy. You just completely demolish the tower, so you get a free reset, and accidentally start a Twitter firestorm over whether the national championship signage is going to come back up.
I don't know how or why, but this whole segment that we just had is somehow going to cause a new argument, I think, this week. Like, there's always something.
I said this in reply to someone on that tweet, was that what I love about this podcast, and it's happened many times in the years we've been doing this, is that I will say something on this podcast, And when I say it, I will think in my head, I maybe shouldn't have said that. I'm worried that's going to piss someone off. Then sure enough, people are going to be pissed. And it's never about the thing I was worried about. It's some like what I thought was a completely innocuous take that I didn't even give a second's thought to.
What was so funny about last week's was like our whole topic last week was like these hypotheticals. It was like we were giving our opinions on if we could decide this, what we're like. And I was thinking that is like ripe for debate. Like someone being like, "Oh, that was a stupid take. Like, why would you pick that game over this game? Whatever." Instead, it was the tweet of the week segment where they were like, "The worst it was JP," and then JP got everyone against us. He also has the oldest man wrestling takes ever. So
JP. I saw that the guy won.
Cody Rhodes, yeah.
I don't follow WWE, but the guy that people wanted to win won. Over
yeah, it's the guy who people wanted to win except for JP Gilbert.
Oh, he wanted the other guy to win?
Yeah.
Was it Roman Reigns?
It was just, it was Roman Reigns. Yeah, College Game Day guest one time, 2 times. Maybe?
I learned about a whole new world of WWE. This is probably not like good for the podcast, but we'll close out with this really quickly. Is that I was because Chris Vanini, the athletic writer, who if you're listening to this, you probably heard of, has covered UCF a lot for the Athletic, is a big WWE guy and covers it a lot, whatever. And he was tweeting about his annoyance over whether media, when actually doing interviews after WWE, can't decide whether they're interviewing people in character or not. And I'd never thought about that. And that's so interesting to me.
Well, they only just started doing press conferences after events like maybe a year and a half ago.
I would think they should be in character, right? But he didn't agree. Where do you land?
I don't really think I think it should just be uniform one way or the other. Like it's like some of them, and it's I think his take was also, I don't know if it was about the media or if it was about the wrestlers themselves do that, where it's like some of them will just be their character and they will like approach it from that. And then like The Rock, who everyone knows who The Rock is, like the other night, he's like this big bad guy now. And then when he did his press conference, he was just like so like mellow and just like giving honest, like real answers and just like he wasn't, I don't know.
What you need to decide is what you want the media presence to be, because do you want it to be like how a post-game presser feels for a game, or do you want it to be when you're like talking to a director about his movie that just unveiled? Like, because those are the two. It's like you have to pick which one of those you want it to be, because it can't be both.
Yeah, and it's both right now, so it is very odd.
That had nothing to do with UCF, but just a thought I had, so figured we'd throw it out there and extend the podcast for no reason.
Yeah. All right, we'll get out of here. We will be back later this week. We'll be back on Friday night with a post-game a post-spring game pod. We episode 201 will barrel toward episode 250, which apparently is going to be more important and bigger because it's bigger.
Literally like a year away.
Yeah. But yeah, we'll be back with 201 on Friday. Until then, you can find us on Twitter at BaileyJAdams22, at by Simmons, at Night Sports Now, and at Pegasus Podcast. Thank you guys so much for being with us, and we will talk to you on Friday.
Bye, everybody.